AgeCurve was incorporated in 2015, right? And I'd love to know the kind of journey from when you started and what you wanted the product to be to what it is now 4 years later or 5 years later almost.
Yeah. So it was started with a totally different idea than what we're doing today. I mean, definitely the title indicated that I want to do something with aging and longevity. That was my real sweetheart since I was a kid, scientifically speaking and life speaking in general. And when I started it, 2015 is just actually I did register it for my birthday gift on my birthday. And that was a typical age when most successful startups are being funded. There was some statistics, in your early 40s.
Yeah.
And, on the other hand, I started it. So when I registered it, I was just really part-time.
Yeah.
So I had a job.
Yeah.
The EMBL EBI here in Houston, Cambridge, the European Bioinformatics Institute, that was paying my bills, where I was a service bioinformatician. And it's a lovely place. It was just not the place where I could make all of my scientific and business dreams come true. So this was the risky step of doing this. So switching back, but not too risking. So to risk my young family in terms of 2 kids,
Yeah.
And so for 2-3 years, that was actually up until 2019, I was just able to commit 1.5 working days to this. But in real life, that was more like 30-40 hours, including all the weekends and all the evenings. Now, this took actually a pretty big toll on my stress levels and all the stuff. So it's really comes with a big price. But if you go after something that you really want to implement and you see yourself as a good fit and you see there's a market fit around there. And the story related to this is that 2013, so about aging longevity, which you consider as part of digital health. And we can talk about these industry labels and how they apply or how they do not apply. So just one thing about historically speaking. So 2015, I launched something and I launched it because 2013 was the year when Calico was funded by Google. So they put eventually $1 billion and they went on the cover of Time magazine to fix death with a very bad message, actually. This is how mainstream media pictures it, and it's not the point, really. The point is health span extension. So we all can get extra healthy decades at the end of our lives. So we don't have to fight those 4, 5, 6 heavy age-associated diseases that our parents and grandparents are going to fight. Because literally these are the ones that are compromising our lives, not our chronological age. And so that was one thing. And the other thing was that scientifically there's been a breakthrough understanding of pulling together different strands of how complex biological aging is. But we understand the 9 main hallmarks of aging. These are molecular biological processes, some of them being like how the immune system is being compromised. This is how the COVID pandemic made it very, very clear, with age being the biggest risk of disease severity. So business started to watch Silicon Valley to this scientific field, and this is how the longevity industry came into being. And this was the wave that I came into and see my window to seize this opportunity. First of all, there's a big difference between health and healthcare. So health, like for all of us, and especially not right now with this public health crisis, which is also a public healthcare crisis, but it's not the same. Health is a personal good that we want to improve as much as we can. And it's one of our biggest assets as individuals. And healthcare is a big public good, where you have problems of distributing these healthcare and governmental and all the equality related stuff. And so when you mention digital health, if I consider my company that is providing personalized aging scores based on protein saliva measurement to end users in the first place, that is health-related issue, health-related information, but more like fundamental biology-related information about our aging status. And biological aging is not a disease, really. It happens with everybody, and there's big questions about to qualify it as a disease so you can develop drugs against it, which are more like legal, regular questions.
Building on that, what was the first product or idea you entered the market with in 2015?
Well, yeah, so I didn't enter it, technically speaking, in terms of I built a prototype kind of thing.
Yeah.
But that was based on the idea. So here we are in the UK, right? And when you think about UK and health, everybody thinks NHS, right?
Yeah.
Because NHS is being like the biggest gorilla in healthcare in the UK, with all its good side and all its drawbacks. And so my original idea was to use machine learning techniques based on medical history data coming from primary and secondary care. Mm-hmm. But for this, if you're a small starter on a startup thing, you need to reach out to clinicians that would be happy to give you this data.
Yeah.
So I wanted to build basically, you know how for kids or newborns, they have these growth charts when you measure their height and weight and percentile ranges. And I wanted to build a decline chart, which what comes with you with based on, say, blood test data, trying to say something about the aging status of your different organs that you measure. So this trajectory. But for this, I needed to have data that was generated by NHS and by GPs and all the tests and blood tests. And I just couldn't get my hand into any kind of nice data set. Unlike, say, Google, who had this big cooperation with some NHS trust in the UK. So they pulled out lots of data with 3 million or 5 million people without asking too much. And then the only justification they provided was that for intensive care units, we tried to predict with AI some of the mortality rates for like kidney patients or something, but they pull data from everybody. Mm-hmm. And for them, it works. If somebody is a nobody like me, first startup, there's no way you get into hands. For doctors, this is their biggest asset, their clients' data.
Yeah.
And then I decided that since I was working in proteomics, now proteomics is one of these high throughput molecular biology technologies like genomics, gene sequencing. So as opposed to sequencing genes, which you have like 20,000 in your human genome, you sequence thousands of proteins and you sequence part of them and you quantify them. And the only way you can do this in an unbiased manner, as opposed to if you think about all these false positive antibody-based tests that now all the COVID testing is about, it can measure the abundance of 5, 6, 10,000 proteins at the same time. And that's your proteome. This is all your proteins from your saliva. And I'd done a pilot on myself beforehand with a friend of mine. And I understood deeply how much I can do. I did like throughout 6 months, 3-4 times I did tests. In one case, I had a cold or a flu, and I see all my immunoglobulins going up. I just understood, and all the microbiome related information, understood how deeply I can cover my basic biology and physiology through that. So then I decided that that was like just 2017 early maybe. So we've been registered earlier, but really the real work been done in the last 2-3 years.
Right.
Yeah. So we still.
Okay, so then having kind of slowly like figured out that journey, more so for the people that are listening, what is AgeCurve now? What is the product? What does it do?
Yeah. So proteins are the real action molecules of life. So what we built is that I understood, based on a saliva test, think about like 23andMe for proteins. You know what 23andMe, yeah? Yeah. So that's what many people understand, because they started this market like 2005. And I really appreciate what they've been doing and all the big fights they went through. I mean, they provide kind of scary information to end users about their Alzheimer's risk, Parkinson. So I really learned this lesson. And as opposed to this, our AgeCurve application starting point is not our healthcare, but aging scores across these hallmarks. So we have like a strong panel of proteins that have been in the literature associated with these hallmark processes, say inflammation or immunosenescence or senescent zombie cells or mitochondrial decline. And then, so the more you have from particle proteins or the less you have, adjusted to your age, it's gonna might be indicative of your accelerated or decelerated or typical aging status. And right now, this is the only thing we can safely say, that measuring and using our data-driven techniques and also curating the literature out there that is telling you we can provide you these aging scores across 4 or 5, 6 hallmarks of aging, which is a very complicated picture. So you're not going to be fine in all of them, but nothing's going to be scary for you because we're not diagnosing you with anything. All we show based on these results that maybe in this compartment, you might look for some compensatory action if you wanted to go to your clinicians. And that's why we were, so, but you asked about our product is based.
Obviously, digital health and prevention and the resurgence of all these tech platforms that can tell you, what diseases you would have and how old you are. What would you say is the customer approach to it? Like, have you seen an increasing trend that people care about this, or is it a bit like I prefer not to know in terms of, yeah.
So first of all, this message that aging is such a malleable process. So we can really fine tune it. We can really have extra healthy decades if we start acting preferentially when you are in your 30s already, when you have your early signs of something going off a little bit. That is, we call biological aging. This knowledge is not out there really. It's still more like a niche community, but there's a lot of high profile cases that are turning more attention to it. And you have all the quantified self people, all the people using Fitbits. So there's this bottom up approach that what you might be doing. I'm pretty sure you do fitness stuff, you do dieting, you take about how your body reacts to caffeine, for instance. How many do you have a day? How many toothbrushes do you have? So you have your evidence-based strong advices, but on the other hand, coming companies like us deeply understanding what molecular biological aging means and try to connect or link up this bottom deep aging information to the general health information. That is nice to have, but I'm pretty sure that if you just do good dieting or good fitness regimen or live a non-stressful life and have a perfect family or whatnot, still you're not going to be able to get over 100 years of age healthily.
Interesting.
Because you're just going to expire before that. And for that, to achieve that, you need to combine all these sane health advices into more deep diving approaches on aging, but eventually it's going to mean you taking pills and going after clinical interventions. And these are the very early stages we see here, when we see there's a couple of cases when you can do something about to modify these basic aging pathways. And so your question was about
is there a shift? Yeah.
More and more interested about it, but their main attitude is at this point, since tech products really made them it's like a luxury what you can deliver with normal tech in terms of instant results and instant media and instant solution, like what you do at SeedLegals, automating lots of stuff. And it's just great for a quick, intense focusing on, I want to get my investment done within 10 days. And you are the only one there who's going to help me do this. Aging is not an overnight process that you're going to check on the mirror tomorrow. It's much longer. So what they expect is from our test or aging test, hey, give me back one number that looks like my chronological age. Say I am 40 years old, how old I am really, biologically speaking. Am I 35 or am I 55? And then I'm going to know whether I need to do something, because if I'm 40 chronologically speaking and I'm 55 biologically speaking, there's something off and I need to do something about it. If I'm 35, that means I'm great, I'm going to live forever. No, that's not the case at all. So it's what they expect is a simple pseudo-chronological age back. And this is not something you can provide safely, because aging is so complicated process. So if you are good in, say, epigenetic aging, that's one hallmark that you can give you back a number. That doesn't mean all the other processes you're going to be doing just right. So imagine that you yourself, or whatever. So you are 40 years old or 65, and turns out you're 55 according to one test. And I'm pretty sure it's easy to find another point when you're not doing as great.
Mm-hmm.
But if you think that that's what you want to get back, you might be tricking yourself into some false reassurance that, for instance, I made a pretty good emphasis of not doing that, not giving you back any simple number like this, because aging is not simple. And this is a hard message to get when you want to build a professional streamlined product, right? As opposed to this, what I can get you is a more comprehensive picture of the different processes, although the strengths of the validity of those tests are going to be different per hallmark. But overall, I give you a much more diversified, gratified picture of your aging status, and you can look for lots of leads.
Okay, great. So specifically to do with the fact that you're in digital health, a question that obviously startups always ask is, did you have to patent what you're doing? Because particularly in medicine, did that ever come across your mind that I've created something new, it's good, I need to patent it? Or was it something that you said, we're creating a platform, we're going to move past this?
So this patent thing, the legal side of it,
yes,
comes up when you are talking to investor types.
Yeah, exactly.
And digital health as such is still a young field. I would say still like maybe 10 years old. But you know what? I count, for instance, 23andMe as digital health. Yeah. Although they at some point they were called like high throughput wellness or wellness omics. So there were different things, and many of these companies did not deliver at all.
Yeah.
So I know, for instance, in that case, they were not keen on doing patents early on. What mattered is the size of your database that you're building up.
Yeah.
What matters is the data.
Yeah.
And so I was under this understanding as well. On the other hand, we're not doing any kind of interventions, and we're not on the therapeutic side when it's really, really important to enter into this pharma technological space with good patents and intellectual property.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the answer is we're certainly going to have ideas around it.
Okay.
And the actual scoring, what we are doing is probably patentable. But right now, that's not my main focus. Main focus is to build something that suits the end users and then reach that elusive product market fit quickly on.
And I guess speaking on focus, we've spoken a lot about the product and the science behind it, right? What other efforts have you put to build the customer base and make what is actually very complicated simple to the end user, whether that's through marketing, whether that's through webinars? Like, what was your approach in building the relationship?
So the good news was that if you start an aging savvy company, you try to build an aging savvy company culture. And that means all the people who's been part of our company as contractors or the core technical team, they were already eager, like these quantified self people already know a lot about themselves, and also very scientifically minded and technically minded. So I've done first a pilot on like 10, 15, 20 people when we really understood how much we can say reliably, scientifically, confidently. And then this whole life extensionist community, this longevity community based on top of this longevity industry is built upon it. It's still amazingly not many people all around. A biggest part is in the US. There's a chunk in the UK as well. And I was part of this community very early on, since I committed to this very early on. And I had enough people, early adopters, who know a lot, with whom we could test this product. But to be honest with you, that was not the part that helps you to bring to make a mainstream product, because these are the early adopters, and it's more like UK financial people or the people who are tech savvy but not aging or digital health savvy, that I'm trying to listen to them more, what they tell. So, but from first point on, I need to charge I needed to charge for this product because it's like the actual test involved is still, if you would go out yourself, it would cost you like probably $1,000 to just get the test done. And you would absolutely don't know what to do with the data, because we built the interpretative high level platform on top of it. So that's why I'm very confident right now. I don't have to fight with the competition that quickly early on, because we're in a niche market.
Okay, great. So I think kind of moving past the product to actually securing the investment, how important were your angel investors or whoever invested in you in terms of advice on top of the actual money they gave you?
Since I'm a scientist, I was really looking for other hands-on investor types.
Yeah.
And just in general, let me give you one advice about investment for if startup founders are looking for it. So I tried to reach out early on to investors in the space I know. And since we are based in Cambridge, UK, which is one of the best startup space in the whole UK, if you're launching a bleeding edge science technical stuff.
Yeah.
For instance, the first person I pitched was like Hermann Hauser, right? Hermann Hauser of Amadeus. And I actually pitched the biggest name in town for my most premature pitch, which is not a good idea, but it helped me to gain some confidence about seeing the interest. But eventually, my story about meeting investors boiled down to the point when I would really recommend to every startupers to not making this their life purpose to secure money through reaching out. It's because in my case, but this is just N equals 1, the real investor reached out for me. And they were looking at you. It's not like you're going to them with some freebies and give you to them all your insights and it's not going to work usually. I don't think it's going to work. What works is if somebody is really wanting to put money in you and they try to reach out to you, it's to be honest, it's a bit like a dating process. It is. I've heard this many ways in analogy type to make it up. And it's best to keep your distance. No.
And when did that happen? The shift of you were doing outreach for investment and then suddenly somebody reached out to you. What do you think caused that? Like what stage was the company at for that to happen?
So this is still just happened to me in last winter, 2019, like in November, December, I just really started to notice I have now a queue of investors. And then the first one that came in, who turned out to be our actual investors, I really need to hold up a queue after that for some reason. Actually, it's a good question. I don't have like a single explanation for it, but I've been in this space around in the last 2 years, and there's some conferences like Undoing Aging, and there's been many UK events in Cambridge, in London. I've participated, so my name was known, and it was understood that we're doing a niche thing. So I was not surprised that finally I had my confidence in what we're building. And it eventually turned out to be this company, this new longevity tech fund based in Prague, the Czech Republic.
Yeah.
And what's important is that I'm from Budapest, Hungary originally.
Yeah.
Though I live in the Cambridge, UK in the last decade.
Yeah.
And this is still a Cambridge-based company. But I really like that there's now Central European longevity tech fund, because the big names are US, UK, there's one in Germany, but in the whole Europe, they are one of the easternmost investors. And the connection came through, and actually LinkedIn worked quite nice as a platform on this. This is, as professional, it works like a charm. And I worked at Singularity University, which was founded in Mountain View next to the Googleplex by, Peter Diamandis and Ray Kurzweil. You might have heard these names. They're pretty big in Silicon Valley. And I profited a lot from that. But your question was a bit different, no?
No, you definitely kind of answered it. I don't think there is an answer as to why at this point investors started getting interested in your company. Often it's a luck game. But actually an interesting question is, in the sense that there were now investors queued up, how did you choose who was the right investor to be your first investor to come on board? What made you choose the longevity fund instead of anybody else?
So it's funny. So on LinkedIn, so you have a lot of social networking going around. People clicking at you, and I noticed that actually, for some reason, it's not I'm reaching out anymore, but people looking after me, and I just don't know who they are. There's a neat trick you can do. Is about when this particular investor came along, was like, I'm always asking, okay, have we met before? And you don't know, most of these people are clicking at you, and you have these non-custom messages sometimes that's saying that, well, based on our mutual interest, let's uncover whether we have something in common. Or most of the time, they just don't tell you anything. You just see the names and like you expect. And I still believe in real personal connections in terms of like, for the first business steps, let's target here. And so you go back and ask, and have we met before? Cheers. Yeah. And that's what I'm doing. And it's amazingly effective technique of making people get to the point. Chase all the crap. Let's not run any circles. This is not Facebook. This is not a dating site. This is a business site. So tell me, what do you want right away? And then we can go ahead. And that was one trick that worked. And then we set up a meeting early on, and then I just really like that they are entering this investor market. They don't have any extra big mouths. Sometimes, with the big investors, and they have these more famous or infamous people around, too many A-type personalities. Yeah. And I just liked the more
straightforward. Yeah.
I just prefer that. It's funny. Yeah. It's different style. UK investor, US investor, and I've met many of them, and it's different. And there's a cultural thing. So the best alignment came out of understanding that they are gonna be patient money. It's not patient money. There's a term about with capital with patience. Enough patience to wait for you to succeed, and helping you along the way with the hands-on stuff.
Yeah. So something that a lot of founders get wrong is they raise, a pre-seed or a seed or whatever, and then they don't talk to their investors for a year. And then, 12 months later, they reach out to their investors and they say, hey, I'm going for my other round. Would you like to invest? And what is the advice there in terms of maintaining a good relationship with your investor?
Just be totally honest with everything. And actually, so I tested this on other investors. So since I'm a scientist and you heard me, it's easy to talk too much, and I need to tell myself not to tell too much, because it's a business I'm doing eventually. I'm not in academia and not a lecturer. So, but also I am the most critical of our data and what it can provide. So I really told them not just the potential of what we can do, which is the big things, the big vision, let's give you idea, but all the the limitations of our data, and telling them the weak points. And by being brutally honest about these things, so not overplaying this thing at all, you can eventually hit the right tone of, you can promise a lot, but not overpromise, to strike the balance between these two extremities about, hey, I'm a big startup founder, I'm going to change the world. It's not like that. It's really not.
Yeah. So I suppose once you had your investors lined up, how did you come across SeedLegals to be the platform on which you closed your round, and what was your experience like?
Yeah, I'm very happy to talk about this because it really worked out well. First of all, it was, so Petr Šramek, who is our main person behind this longevity tech fund, was the person who told me about SeedLegals. And when we made up our term sheet, then they already looked into it having a UK-based phrasing of it, because we are a UK company. And just SeedLegals came up, and looking into the conventional other routes that I would have gone through, that would involve our lawyers that we were working with, or our accountants that we were working with, I just did a quick checking about in terms of the time delivery range of getting things done and the financial aspects. And you just really came atop very quickly on these two resource intensive processes in terms of being able to really cut the financial burden of this process, and most importantly the time component of all the legal stuff. And ever since then, SeedLegals, I'm using it for many other purposes, because not many know that so setting up an option pool scheme, for instance, and there's many other things you can do besides just investment.
Well, actually, that's something I knew that you guys had done around, and you've recently started to set up the option scheme now. I think a lot of founders actually have a misunderstanding on why you should put an option scheme in place, and I suppose how difficult and how easy it is to do. I'd love to hear from you as like a growing company, why you decided to put that in place after you raised investment.
So option pool, I've already made commitments to our early technical team with whom I built the core product, that I really want them to have option pool access in exchange of vesting periods later on. So there was no question I need to do that. That's one thing. The other thing is obviously, so this amount of investment that we have raised, it's a pre-seed. It's not all the money in the world that's gonna get you. So when you hire your first key people, you need to provide them some more opportunity about really having a stake in this company for longer than the period.
And if you were to explain to another founder that was maybe looking at the platform, like in a few sentences, what it's like working with SeedLegals, I'm really interested to see how you'd explain that, because we obviously have a pitch, but I kind of like hearing it from other founders.
So how would I try to tell them what is it they should be expecting, or So everything was very quick. So as you are a tech product and it was your main goal, or Anthony Rose, who's your founder, builder, and I just realized yesterday, by the way, his background in BBC, setting up BBC iPlayer, and he's already giving a lot to our family.
Yeah,
that person really knows a lot about how to build a good tech product, and it's again, unfortunately, in digital health. So most clients expect the tech kind of good streaming flow that you provide for the users. It's unfortunately in longevity and aging, it's way more complicated. But you have your high standards set up. And so what was great is to jump into a call with everybody. Either it was your lawyer or it was just, and I remember the first person I set up a call, that just setting up the cap table through the platform. And I really, to be honest with you, I know that you should read the manual, and I didn't. But when I got, so actually I was this kind of a dumb user who were expecting everything being given to me in that limited Zoom chats that we're doing, but I got everything done through that route as well, which was great. And I played the dumb person because of my time resource. But for the more complicated steps, there's a little job that you need to do on the website, just reading one more focused post of yours, and then jump next day to the call, and everything just went by the timeline that you wanted to set up. On the other hand, it was not like you are urging us. It's I am the one who should be making my temporal arrangements. And by the way, just one thing that is particular here about when I closed this investment in the 19th or 17th of March, which was the height of the pandemic scare and lockdown. That's when the whole thing started. And actually, that amount of stress, I just don't want anybody to go through in terms of thinking about. So everybody is under stress right now, all sorts. But me on the other side, I'm starting to having other thoughts about what. So turns out the investor was very firm throughout. He wanted to put the money. They wanted to close this deal in January already, and I didn't do that. So I recommend everybody to get things done as quick as they can, and with you they can.
Yeah. I think we all saw, well, what ended up actually happening in March was 75% of rounds closed, fine, like yours, and 25% didn't. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And part of the problem was exactly people had set back their timelines. And part of them were the investors maybe weren't right at the time. But that's particularly one of the reasons we want to talk to you, is because you were one of the companies that did close at a time where a lot of sectors were not getting investment. So it's really interesting to hear. And this is a question that it doesn't allow for evergreen content because it's COVID-19 focused. But now that COVID-19 has set and lockdown is present, what have you decided to use this time, or rather this like quiet, to do for the company? What are the steps that you took in the last 3 months?
That's a good question. Yeah. And I have a good answer for this. Yeah. So what was obvious to me is that since we are being digital health and most importantly focusing on aging and longevity, and that companies like us do have a future, because right now we have such a major public health crisis that was not happening. It happened last time like a century ago.
Yeah.
And suddenly everybody's realizing that our biggest asset as individuals are our underlying health. And so what I spent most of March and April with is that since we, from the saliva, can measure thousands of proteins, we can also measure the bacteria and the viruses to actually make a COVID-19 test based on the saliva. But in our case, the extra advantage would be is that we can link the basic survival information, whether you're a carrier of this disease, to the long-term health, aging, longevity scores, like what are your immunosenescence, immune aging signals that might be suggesting that the risk of disease severity in your case is going to be much, much higher. And so with this mass spectrometric proteomics test that we actually put together, it's a targeted proteomics test. So you'll be using the same platform, but the machine taking saliva, but everything else in a different setting. But we have good experience in turning this into an actual clinical test.
Yeah.
That would give you back your viral load, so your carrier status. Unfortunately, since it's an overnight shipping and our lab is in the US, it's like within 2 days. So for all the people who are worrying about being home or in quarantine because of some symptoms and not in the hospital setting, but they just wanted to know their status, we could provide something, and we could provide much more by connecting survival information, basic biology into longevity information about your immune status, aging statuses. And this is still on the table, only this is not what I got the money for.
Yeah.
I'm certainly we are. So this is a pre-seed round I mentioned to you. It's couple tens of thousands of pounds we are talking here, which is good enough for planning ahead if you stick to your already strict budgeting plan. And this test of COVID-19 would have been a massive pivoting. Yeah. And in a way, this is what we done for like 6 weeks, like March and most of April. But this went ahead with all the consultants. I have a really good consultant team, including the investors, thinking that we should do something about it. Because we can do something about it. Yeah. We put together, theoretically speaking, the panel. But what we didn't have access for is COVID positive samples to validate our test. Which is still a problem that you can solve. But you need to launch here actually a clinical study, although this is just you need some saliva to test, and what we have learned is a lot, because we learned all the clinical side about how to set up an ethically approved study, and understanding a lot about what a clinical study is demanding from your platform. Because right now, as I'm telling you, since we're doing this aging test, this is not a very heavily regulated thing. This is not a disease. This is not a clinical thing that we're doing. But we're trying to make it as close to clinical standards as we can. But this is not about telling you your diagnosis of a liver disease. That must be super confident and super strong signals. Yeah. Yeah. And so we learned a lot about, once we would move into the clinical space more heavily, which I'm pretty sure we're going to do, because based on these thousands of proteins, we have a lot of information that you can turn into actual disease biomarkers later on. So, or for drug discovery. And this is a big part of the thing. I'm just focusing on aging right now, but this is just like 5-10% of all of our signals, but we have way more.
Yeah.
And so pivoting, we were like, for 6 weeks is like everything, the world turned upside down, and we could benefit from it as an intensive learning procedure. In terms of actual product, or we couldn't get any grants. So Innovate UK had a grant, but you would have thought that with this chance, you would get some money, but it was not just easy to get some extra boost for this to make it a reality. But we might still come back to this because we can check all the other winter illness statuses, and this COVID-19 is not gone at all.
No.
So there's going to be another winter coming, and so this is going to be a permanent demand right now.
Yeah. And I think an interesting thing in looking at your background is that obviously you were a scientist and bioinformatician for a long time, and then you became a founder. Now, what was your strength going into that journey, and what would you say is something that you could work on as being a founder and CEO of a company?
So what was the second part? So what I would say is with the advice, or?
Yeah, just kind of like, what did you learn coming into this? But also, what was your strongest strength coming into the process? What made you a good founder and CEO, and what have you learned along the way?
Yeah, so there are the kind of founders who are, and actually these are the ones who are really getting a lot of money, the serial entrepreneurs, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm definitely not a serial entrepreneur. A serial entrepreneur is somebody whose main skill is to build great products, and those products can come from different parts of life. So for instance, Anthony Rose, who could did a lot of study, it's a very successful serial entrepreneur, but doing totally different things in many ways.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not those people. I'm the person who decided when I was in like my early teens that I do something about aging and longevity, and the time for doing that now is here. When I was thinking about this back in the 80s, I just know that we can totally do this. We can totally live much healthier longer. You need hardcore technology, and since then science delivered us for all those hopes, turn them into reality. So we can turn these possibility into probabilities. And the time came when the actual world is now watching, and so there's this timing. And so in my case, my biggest strength is about being 100% confident that this can be done, and then this must be done.
Yeah.
And this is like more like, you could say from a different perspective, is like almost, I don't like this term, like I'm not even using like pseudo-religious commitment to something, a mission, where I know what a mission is, and that's gonna get me through, and that's gonna get me through the biggest
ups and downs.
Ups and downs. But on the other hand, this is very abstract thing. So the real thing that came handy in my case was that I was a service bioinformatician for like 10 years before, and I was actually dealing with end users. So that was like not a high academic, just a researcher. I did some research, but it was, I service back data to end users. These end users were actually other scientists, so it's still very nerdy, but I understood how to be a service mindset. And I built a service. So that's why I decided I'm not going to pitch others. I'm building the platform straight on top to service people, and I'm going to make them buy some of these tests. So as a CEO founder, you need to be ready to sell your first 100 products. And then you want to get somebody who's really a good salesperson. Those two persons. So the one thing is the big commitment. That's like whatever it floats around you. Your aura set up for. I'm so sure. But the real thing is about this very detailed understanding of how you go to provide a service.
And what was the biggest realization moment? I know that's a big question, but you've been kind of in the game for 2 years. what was kind of something that happened that you didn't expect in the slightest, and was something that you're like, okay, I'm never going to let that happen again. Like, I've learned from that, whether it's good or bad.
What was the... So originally we launched, so like for some text editors, people build in too many features that you don't like actually. Mm-hmm. And I've over-designed many ways what we offer in terms mm-hmm. of the raw data.
Yeah.
And under-designed the summary of what you want to provide to people, the quick cheat sheet that they want to learn. What is my main point? And I would say that we put too much into this building the product phase, and there should be more user testing, and that's still a very active process right now. I mean, it's not like we have solved this issue and we have the best product in town. What because we opened a new niche market, and with this type of data, nobody ever tried to, as far as I know, try to turn this kind of a high throughput proteomics data, really literal reporting of thousands of proteins and quantification into something that might look like an interesting and telling a story about yourself.
No, that's a great point.
Sorry.
That's a really, really great point. Yeah, definitely one that you will get specifically dealing with founders that are in health tech or digital tech, because there's so much behind the science, right? It's hard to make it simplified. Other than that, Attila, this was great, and thank you so much for taking the time to, well, one, speak about AgeCurve more importantly, and then seeing how SeedLegals could help with that. Is there anything else that you would like to say, whether that is advice or something that's upcoming in the company, or anything you wanted to say at all?
Yeah, we have a lot of plans, but I'm not at the stage when I should just like start
talk about them.
Right now, our biggest thing would be to build a stronger team, mm-hmm. and trying to make some geographical extension of being able to provide this product. But still, we are very much in pandemic times in terms of it's still the word that we just don't recognize anymore. That was like 3 months ago.
Yeah.
And yeah, we should consider the discussion 2 months later.